Hey guys, Mark Holthe here, Canadian immigration lawyer, just jumping on to share a few thoughts about immigration and in particular the practice of immigration. Many of you are probably wondering, why would I care, Mark? Well, having been in the trenches over the last few years and really working with individuals all over the world to find pathways to permanent residence, I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a real transition within immigration practice, the way the government interacts with people, and it has resulted in a world that causes me a lot of stress. And if it's causing me stress, I can only imagine what it's doing for all of you. I'm broadcasting here, and it's actually not a broadcast. I'm videoing. This is Cottonwood Park, where I love to go, and I found a nice little place to sit down here and just spend some time sharing some of my thoughts on where immigration has been and where it's headed. And as you guys have seen, at least those of you fellow practitioners out there, in the early days when I started practice in the early 2000s, I would say 2003, 2004, there was always a way to fix things. Immigration always had built into it a substantial amount of discretion in the officers to allow them to correct mistakes or to allow discretion to override maybe some technical deficiencies in applications, or to just show mercy to people when genuinely they were trying to do one thing, but in the end ended up applying through the wrong program or ended up completing application forms incorrectly. There was mercy in the system. And now I think most of you can appreciate, especially as you hear me talk about express entry, but it's now filtered to most types of immigration applications. There's not a lot of discretion in the system. Either you get it right or you don't. And why did it shift to this? Well, in the early days, if you were looking to immigrate to Canada, and when I say the early days, I know there's a lot of practitioners out there who've been practicing far longer than I have. But since I've been involved in immigration, in the early days, there was less emphasis on getting things processed quickly and more emphasis on getting things processed correctly. And when I say correctly, I mean correctly from the standpoint of, yes, the purposes of the immigration laws and policies are being applied correctly, but there was also an ability to correct things when innocent mistakes occurred. And there's good and there's bad about that. One of the good things is that when you live in that kind of a world, if people unwittingly or innocently make errors or fail to include things, the government would send back a deficiency letter. And that letter would allow individuals to then correct whatever minor little technical problem that existed. And I'll give you a practical example. So I think some of you have heard in recent videos that I had some clients who mistakenly uploaded a marriage certificate from their pastor, or it was from the church. And it was a legal, valid certificate with a seal and everything on it, but it wasn't the actual civil document issued by that particular state in the US. And in the past, if that happened, in most cases, the government would, at least the officer adjudicating the application, would go back and send them a letter and say, here's what we're missing from your application. And then the person would say to themselves, oh, shoot, I didn't realize that. Whew, thank you. And then they would upload the correct one. Well, in the world that we're dealing with now, that type of an error results in the application being returned as incomplete. And normally that wouldn't be a big deal. Okay, we didn't get something right. It's okay. We'll just resubmit, right? Well, with that policy now, and we call it a one-touch policy. It basically means that they're only going to look at the application once. If there's something missing, they will send it back, and that will end the adjudication of that application. It's great for stats. It's great for processing applications within the service levels, timelines that they've been given as basically requirements when they're processing applications. So it's good for an officer. But for individuals, especially in the world of express entry, where invitations to apply are so precious, where the comprehensive ranking system increases seems like every draw almost, it's constantly increasing. Just because you got an ITA, an invitation to apply for express entry, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, the reality is, and checking behind here, something is walking around behind me. Hopefully it's just a little mouse and not something bigger. Although I did see a deer carcass up on the hill where I think some coyotes probably had a good feast. I don't think coyotes usually don't eat people, but anyways, my wife says every time I go down here, and if you look, you can see it's fairly remote. there's there's lots of deer down here, and where there's deer, there's animals that want to feed on them. So we haven't seen too many cougars down here for a while, but I guess if one jumps on me and eats me now, well, you'll get it on video and it will go viral on YouTube as long as someone finds the phone. Although, unlike going to Waterton, which is right up in the Rocky Mountains, this is still right near Lethbridge, so I'm feeling pretty safe with being down here by myself. Anyways, back to what I was talking about, if I can collect my thoughts. The geese are flying up above here. I don't know if you can even see them. They're honking as they fly by. This is it, guys. This is recording in nature. Anyways, back to the discussion. So, in a world where the invitations and the rounds of invitations are constantly increasing, getting your application returned can mean the difference in you being able to immigrate to Canada or not. And it's really, really a heartbreaking situation when you have an individual who has sunk their life into trying to get one of those magical ITAs, and then to see it all slip through their fingers because they failed to include the proper marriage certificate. But that's the world we're in. And sometimes people ask me, okay, Mark, you're starting your own firm, and it's been vendors that I've worked with, it's been people who've helped me to get my website set up, and it's just about ready to go live. It's been other lawyers. They say, what is your why? In other words, the why that makes you do what you do. What is your why that makes someone, well, I guess the question would be, why would I want to hire you? Like, why? What makes you special? And when I think about that and I've pondered over it, the why, in terms of professionally why I do this, is because I want to prevent people from making those simple little mistakes that destroy their dream of immigrating to Canada. And simply put, that's why I do what I do. It's not to line my pocket with money. Trust me on that. Please trust me. If I wanted to do things differently, if I wanted to follow the pattern of all of the more profitable firms out there, I would have a stable full of paralegals and assistants who I'm paying the least amount of money possible to, who generate lots of work product. The quality may not be perfect, but the volume is high. And then I simply oversee and kind of manage. That would be a more profitable business model than what I'm doing here. But that's not why I do it. I do it is because I want to protect people from themselves. And 95% of the time when people get applications returned, they genuinely feel like they've done things properly. And to add just one other element to it, when they've done things, they often don't even realize where the mistake was. Sometimes it's just an innocent mistake where they failed to do something that they knew they should have, but it was just an oversight. In many other cases, they truly thought they had done everything correctly, but then the government comes back, returns their entire application, and tells them no. And it's a pretty ruthless approach to take when the consequence of getting that application returned for that individual or that family is losing out on their opportunity to immigrate to Canada. So that's my why. And as I've watched things evolve over time, over the last 15 years, as I've seen a transition from processing times of sometimes in some countries up to 7 years to get processed in Canada, dropping down to, in some circumstances, I think the record was 3 weeks once I had for a client. Imagine that, not having a connection, and actually I think they were in Canada, those people, but 3 weeks from submission to getting your request for your passport. That's amazing. But there's lots that is lost in that process. And one of the things that's lost is an element of compassion, an element of mercy. And so that's my why, guys. My why that I do what I do is to truly help people prevent, well, it's hard to articulate it. It's to do everything in my power to save people from themselves, to help people not lose their dream of immigrating to Canada because of a simple mistake or a simple oversight. These aren't rocket science type things, guys. So how do I do that as an immigration lawyer, where in my previous firm, my hourly rate was $425 an hour? That's a lot of money. And when you have an office to support, when you have staff, you have all these other elements to support, that rate is entirely reasonable in the circumstances. But I know for many people, it doesn't work that way. So I had to find a way. If I truly do, and my why is to help people, then I had to figure out a way to change my business model so that I would have an opportunity to reach clients, no matter who they are, to offer my direct assistance, not through some intermediary. And when I say an intermediary, an assistant, a paralegal, at least at this stage, it's my direct support. I had to figure out a way to do that in a way that would not, that I could still be profitable. Because if I can't make money and support my family, then there is no point in doing this, right? The purpose of a business is to be profitable. There are NGOs out there, there are nonprofits that's not their purpose. But for me, to support my family, my wife, my 4 kids, I needed to find a way to do that. And so after lots of pondering and thought and experimentation, I think I found it. And I'm excited to work with people all over the world in a way where they get my direct assistance, where they have control over their applications, where they are utilizing me for what really they need to pay for and not for what they don't. And what I mean by that is, when in the world of express entry, for example, I do not represent fully. And what I mean by that full representation is I don't submit your application through my rep portal. I've discovered that it's far more efficient for both me and my client if I teach them how to do it, and then I provide the support. So in a way, if I was to coin it, it would be client-centered, firm-supported. And I have some wonderful people that I'm bringing on that are every bit as smart, every bit as capable, that care every bit as much as I do, that are joining Holthe Immigration Law. And so how do I scale? I scale by having people who care as much as I do about your applications. And so stay tuned as this unfolds. But whether you get my service or you get one of the other lawyers that works with me, that type of service is going to be of the same high quality. And the secret to the whole process is collaboration, working directly with you, because no one cares as much about your applications as you do. And no firm in the whole, I can say, entirety of the world cares more about your application than we do. And it's possible that there may be others that care as much, because there's some good people out there. But I can, without reservation, say no one cares more. And that's really the mission behind Holthe Immigration Law. And I'll probably change the name at some point in time, but the reality is most of you know me. And so I want you to understand that the same guy that's in those videos doing the EE Live Q&As, that has the Canadian Immigration Podcast, that guy is me, and this is his firm. And this is how we help you and support you in realizing your dream of immigrating to Canada. So the website will be launched shortly. Watch for that. I still have my do-it-yourself guides, which I use to give, it's really an access to justice thing, a way to give direction and guidance to people who can't otherwise afford it. If you're an individual who's scraping by, just trying to get the minimum settlement funds, and you're working in Canada in a job that's just really low paying, and you can't afford to just outright hire me to represent you. The reality is I've created the Do-It-Yourself Guide, the Express Entry Complete Step-by-Step Guide to Doing It Yourself, which can be found at the CanadianImmigrationInstitute.com website. That's what it's there for. And but for those who are looking for support, who just need just that right amount of support to make sure that their application is as correct as it possibly can be, to avoid that devastation of getting it returned, that is the model. That is the Holthe Immigration Law difference. Client-centered, firm-supported. All right. Well, guys, this is it. And I'll just stand up here. And you can see this is my wonderful Cottonwood Park right here. It's where I go to unwind. It's where I go to recharge. And I look forward to continuing to do lots more videos. And I'm experimenting with some different ways of doing little snippets that are a little bit shorter than this. But The reality is, I'm learning as I go, and the only thing I know to do is to just share. So this is Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, ex-immigration officer, and former high school teacher, signing off and wishing you guys all the best as you navigate this crazy world that we call Canadian immigration. Take care.